Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. The US Senate Republicans have narrowly passed President Trump's sweeping tax cut and spending bill, with JD Vance casting a tie-break vote. The bill will now head to the House of Representatives, with Trump wanting it signed into law by July the 4th. French President Emmanuel Macron has spoken with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin for the first time in almost 3 years, discussing a potential Ukraine ceasefire and Iran. Meanwhile, the US says it won't send some pledged weapons to Kyiv.
टीवी नेटवर्क के फाउंडर और संसद में मेरे साथी कार्तिकेय शर्मा जी, नेटवर्क की पूरी टीम, देश विदेश से आए सभी अतिथि, देवी और सज्जनों, न्यूज एक्स वर्ल्ड इसकी शुभ शुरुआत और इसके लिए मैं आप सबको बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं, बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। मीडिया के इस तरह के इवेंट्स होते रहते हैं, लेकिन आपके नेटवर्क ने इसे एक नया डायमेंशन दिया है।
Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. US Senate Republicans have narrowly passed President Trump's sweeping tax cut and spending bill, with JD Vance casting a tie-break vote. The bill will now head to the House of Representatives, with Trump wanting it signed into law by July the 4th. French President Emmanuel Macron has spoken with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin for the first time in almost 3 years, discussing a potential Ukraine ceasefire and Iran. Meanwhile, the US says it won't send some pledged weapons to Kyiv. Donald Trump says that Israel have agreed to a 60-day Gaza ceasefire, with the US president urging Hamas to commit to what he called a final proposal. Further military action has been reported in the enclave. Meanwhile, Israel has threatened to respond after it intercepted a suspected Houthi missile fired from Yemen, targeting an Israeli airport. Israel's defense minister was speaking after the first such strike since the end of the 12-day war with Iran. Meanwhile, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has urged Iran to resume nuclear talks, with the EU offering to facilitate the return to diplomacy. Iran have said it needs more time before resuming talks with the United States. The Quad Group of the United States, India, Japan and Australia have condemned the devastating Pahalgam terror attack of April the 22nd, calling on the perpetrators to be brought to justice, however stopped short of mentioning Pakistan in the joint statement. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's new welfare bill has passed through the House of Commons, though further concessions were made after the 11th hour after an in-party rebellion over the impact on poverty levels. And the jury in the high-profile trial of Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial have reached a verdict on 4 of 5 counts the music mogul faces. They remain undecided on the most serious racketeering charge after 2 days of deliberation. Well, we start this hour in North America, and Donald Trump's sweeping tax and spending bill has passed through the Senate, but not without major controversy and political fallout. The bill extends Trump-era tax cuts and enacts sharp reductions in social spending, particularly Medicaid and food aid. Moderate House Republicans from low-income districts are raising red flags over the Medicaid cuts, while GOP members from high-tax states are demanding larger breaks on the state and local tax deductions. Democrats remain united in opposition. House Leader Hakeem Jeffries called it the largest assault on American healthcare and nutrition in history. Meanwhile, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the US House of Representatives, said that he is committed to delivering the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, noting that some Republicans remain unhappy with elements of the legislation. Let's listen in to what he said.
We knew the Senate would amend the House product. I encouraged them to amend it as lightly as possible. They went a little further than many of us would have preferred. But we have the product now. As the President said, it's his bill. It's not a House bill, it's not a Senate bill, it's the American people's bill. And my objective and my responsibility is to get that bill over the line. So we will do everything possible to do that, and we'll work with all of our colleagues. I'm going up to Rules now to visit with our members who are working probably late into the night to do the next stage in this.
Well, the Senate bill is projected to disproportionately benefit the top 1% households, making over $663,000 in 2025, while the Congressional Budget Office warns nearly 12 million Americans could lose health insurance. Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer slammed the vote, calling it a shameful rip-away of care and food from the most vulnerable. Criticism isn't only partisan. Billionaire Elon Musk, once a Trump ally, blasted the bill for its massive $3 trillion projected cost and pledged to fund challenges to GOP lawmakers. In response, Trump threatened to target Musk's businesses, including Tesla, spooking investors. Wall Street reacted with mixed signals. The Dow rose nearly 1%, but the S&P 500 and Nasdaq dipped as fears grew over a brewing Musk-Trump feud and the bill's long-term debt impact. Analysts say the bill amounts to generational wealth shift, benefiting older, wealthier Americans at the expense of the poor and young. Meanwhile, rival automakers Ford and GM surged after reporting strong sales as buyers rushed to beat tariff hikes. Well, joining us to discuss this huge announcement from the United States overnight and its ramifications, Rabinder Sachdev, a foreign affairs expert who is joining us from New Delhi. Thank you ever so much for being here. Let's look at this bill. We know it's been controversial. We know that it's been discussed. We know amendments have been made, but still, after passing on such a tight margin, questions remain. What do you think the impact will be to the average American in the face of course, uncertainty, cost of living, immigration issues at the forefront as well?
Thank you, Joshua. Pleasure to be with you. Yes, the impact will be quite significant. What we are seeing is, in a way, the reordering or the remaking of America as per, let's say, the Trump-utopian worldview. Now, that said, the Senate version of the bill is not the final bill yet. Let us remember that also. This is the final version of the Senate, yes. Now, the House has its own version also. Both of these bills would need to be reconciled. I think it was Reagan who once said that, an apple and an orange go into a conference between the Senate and the House. That is, the Senate version and the House version are different. They go into a conference room, an apple and an orange, and what comes out, emerges, is maybe a peach, right? So the compromise between the two could be somewhat different, not much in this case, because both sides, the upper and the lower, are controlled by the Republicans. Now, we will see definitely still more, contests and fights, a little bit split, if not split, disagreement within the Republicans, but more or less it seems some version of this bill will pass through. And it will certainly have the impact to which you're referring to, which most everyone is referring, as to, cutting down on medical, healthcare, and nutrition, and at the same time, bigger tax rates, and at the same time, adding to the overall sovereign debt of the United States. about $3.5 trillion. And this is not counting the 2017 tax cut that Trump gave, because this is extending that in a way. So the total impact on the sovereign debt is around $5 trillion or more. With its accompanying impact on the bond markets, we don't know what that could mean. So all in all, we are in for a very, very interesting time regarding, I would think, America, policies, and multiple aspects within America. Yes.
Yes, absolutely, Rabinda, and we will be keeping an eye on the fallout from this bill passing through the Senate and the next steps of it going through the House. Rabinda, you will be staying with us as we stay with US politics, and tensions between former allies Donald Trump and Elon Musk have exploded once again into an open political feud, with Trump now threatening to target the tech billionaire's citizenship status and government subsidies. The spat comes after Musk blasted Trump's sweeping One Big Beautiful Bill, calling it bloated and irresponsible. He's accused Republican lawmakers of betraying fiscal conservatives by backing what he claims is a wasteful spending spree. In a fiery response, Trump suggested he could use the Department of Government Efficiency, nicknamed DOGE, to investigate how much taxpayer money Musk's companies receive. The president even went as far as to joke about looking into whether Musk could be deported, despite the Tesla CEO being a naturalized US citizen who immigrated from South Africa decades ago. This is what Trump said.
Elon Musk is ripping into this bill again. Are you concerned that Republicans are going to be swayed by Musk and his money?
No, I don't think so. I think what's going to happen is Doge is going to look at Musk. And if Doge looks at Musk, we're going to save a fortune. Thank you very much, everybody. I don't think you should be playing that game with me.
Mr. President, why that terrible time? London appears is about to vote on.
I hear we're doing well, Ron. I hear we're doing well.
Are you confident this can get
I don't know. Confident. What does confident mean when you're like, when you have one vote and you have 100 people going to vote? I think so. I think it's going to be the greatest bill ever passed.
Your concerns about the Medicaid, though, cuts.
No, we're not going to be playing with Medicaid. Only waste, fraud, and
million Americans.
Yeah, the Democrats have it wrong. Yeah, waste, fraud, and abuse. In fact, if you look at what's gone on, we've gone way back. We take care of Medicaid. We take care of Medicare. They will blow Medicare and Medicaid because they have no idea what they're doing. Just like they don't have any idea what they did on the border, they have no idea. Medicaid is in big trouble with the Democrats.
Well, Musk is now threatening to form a new America party to challenge Republican incumbents who support the spending plan. He says he wants to use his influence and billions in campaign donations to back candidates who will rein in what he sees as runaway federal debt. The fallout has rattled markets, with Tesla shares dropping as investors worry about possible cuts to subsidies for electric vehicles and SpaceX contracts. What was once a cooperative, if unlikely, relationship between Trump and Musk has now turned into an all-out political and personal battle, one that could reshape the conservative landscape as the 2026 midterms approach in the not-too-distant future. Well, Rabinda Sachdev, thanks for staying with us. This feud between Trump and Musk, of course, revolving initially around the big, beautiful bill that has been passed, but Elon Musk's rhetoric has remained the same. And Trump's threats now, not just looking at his companies, but also talking about deportation. How destabilizing to US politics could this feud be, given that you have the world's richest man and arguably the world's most powerful man that were former allies fighting against one another?
Thank you. Yes, it could definitely be. I mean, right now what's happening in a way, as we were mentioning earlier, it's a remaking of America happening, driven by the MAGA and Trump philosophy. And in that, there are fissures also. Now, in terms of, Musk and Trump feud, definitely it's about, the big, beautiful bill. I mean, Musk says that it will add to the sovereign debt and we are going bankrupt and such. Definitely that's a fact. It could be that, and it is that, it is Musk's political ideology, okay, through the prism of which he's looking. There could be some other thing also. However, the key is that so far, it seems both of them are sparring, like in a boxing fight, they're sparring. Okay, they're kind of jabbing across but not hitting each other. Soon it may happen that one of them may draw blood. And that's when things will get ugly for, let's say, at least the Republican side or at least, let's say, the conservative world. But what Musk is saying is that he's talking about America First Party or America Party, and he's criticizing the American two-party system, on which, yes, there's a definite logic. America's two-party system or American democracy has become very rigid, and it has kind of it has got stuck in a jam, okay, the various interests. And it may be definitely useful and helpful for America to, I think, have a refresh of its democracy. One last thing, this feud between Musk and Trump, I think, is drawing an interesting parallel I'm seeing also between a emerging feud which could spiral up between Mamdani and Trump. Right, in both cases, it's immigrants who are there, and Trump is threatening them with arrest, deportation, etc. So that's another, another playbook playing along.
Yes, Amrabinder, you'll be staying with us once again because we're going to look at protesters who have gathered together again against Trump's new migrant detention centre in the Florida Everglades, dubbed Alligator Alcatraz. US President Donald Trump on Monday toured the site and declared it a powerful symbol of his plans to expand mass deportations if elected. The fortified camp, built in just 8 days, is surrounded by swampland, razor wire and guard towers, and is designed to hold up to 5,000 migrants at a time. During the tour, Trump praised state and federal officials for their coordination and made light of the camp's dangerous location, saying escapees would have to dodge gators and pythons if they tried to flee. He called it a big, beautiful deterrent, adding that this type of centre should be replicated across the country. But outside the gates, hundreds of protesters gathered, chanting "Shut it down" and waving signs reading "Cruelty isn't security." Human rights groups described the conditions as inhumane, while indigenous leaders from the Miccosukee and Seminole tribes condemned the project for destroying sacred land and threatening fragile wildlife. Environmentalists have filed multiple lawsuits citing damage to protected ecosystems. The facility's opening comes amid a broader push by Republican lawmakers to fast-track immigration enforcement funding. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has deployed 100 National Guard troops to support the center, and migrant transfers are expected to begin immediately. As political pressure builds ahead of the 2025 conversations, Alligator Alcatraz has become a flashpoint in America's immigration debates, hailed by Trump as necessary and denounced by critics as a dark symbol of fear and exclusion. Let's listen into what a protester has had to say.
I live 4 miles away from where Alligator Alcatraz is happening. I think it's important for me to be here because I want my voice to be heard. I am someone in the crowd. I'm sure not everyone is going to notice me, but I know that me being here, I'm making a difference myself. I want my kids to look up to me when they get older and be like, my mom fought for my land.
Well, once again joining us, Rabinder Sachdev, thank you for sticking here. This is, of course, a controversial move. Trump's immigration policy has been controversial. We've seen protests in recent weeks and months, but this, he says, will be a deterrent. He's making light and making jokes about the wildlife and the situation where people will be housed. Do you think there is a real reason for protest, given the fact that this situation could be seen as controversial, or is this just another step in Trump's grander plan towards mass deportations of migrants?
Thank you. I mean, it's actually all of what you said. We can unpack it. The protesters, I do think they are within their rights, because what's seeming is the treatments or the process is inhumane and also inhuman. Okay, so the protesters have a point there, no doubt. Now, from Trump perspective, this is what he's sought out to do. This is what he has to show to his base, that I am taking strict action against illegals. Okay, and the optics of it, or rather the optopolitics of it, which we are seeing, is what Trump wants to convey to his base or within America and show that, yes, he is a strong president and promise made, promises delivered, right? That perspective. And also, another intent for the United States in doing this is to let these optics or images go around the world also, so as to deter future illegal migrants coming into the country. So that's what Trump is doing. And as you said, as we see this, the very name of this detention center is so much like out of a Hollywood movie, kind of a thing, right? A thriller or a horror movie, Alligator Alcatraz. And it is said, yes, that the only way out of that place is a one-way flight. No other way you can get out of that. Okay, so as if anybody is looking to get out, but what they're doing is they're building a township within that of 5,000, as you mentioned the numbers, and these to be replicated across the country. That's what he says. But on the other hand, you see Trump's target of arrests is not keeping up. They've set a target of arresting 3,000 illegals every day. What the Department of Homeland Security is being able to do is maybe 800, 900,000. So there's a pressure coming from up, down, from Steve Miller downwards all the way, ramp up the number of arrests. So we will see more and more of such, facilities happening, more and more of such stories, not only stories, they're mass narratives of, pain, which we are seeing amongst the illegals. So the point is that, fair enough, the treatment should be humane and human-like. That's where America seems to be failing, and that's where I think Trump should ratchet up. Fine, do whatever you want to, but look at that aspect.
Yes, absolutely. Rabinder Sachdev, thank you ever so much for joining us on the programme today. We're going to head away from North America and look further towards the Middle East, but stick with US President Donald Trump, who is calling on Hamas to accept what he describes as a final proposal for a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza. He says Qatari and Egyptian mediators will deliver the terms to Hamas shortly. Trump announced that US officials held a long and productive meeting with the Israeli representatives, though he didn't name them. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance were expected to meet senior Israeli advisor Ron Dermer. He confirmed that Israel has agreed to the terms and promised that the US would work towards ending the war during the ceasefire. Trump warned Hamas that the deal will not get better, it will only get worse. Speaking to reporters in Florida, Trump said he's hopeful an agreement could be reached as early as next week and reaffirmed he'll be very firm with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu when they meet at the White House. Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Saar confirmed Israel's approval of the US proposed 60-day ceasefire, which would also see half of the remaining hostages freed in exchange for Palestinian prisoners and bodies. Trump believes momentum from recent strikes on Iranian nuclear sites and a separate ceasefire may help lock in a longer-term truce in Gaza. He stressed his priority, getting hostages out and stopping the fighting. Well, joining us to discuss this latest development in, of course, an ongoing devastating situation in Gaza for both sides, Dr. Wael Awad, a Middle East affairs expert, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you ever so much for your time. Trump has proposed what he calls a final chance for Hamas. Israel has agreed to it. Given the recent activity in the Middle East, do you think there's more likelihood that Hamas might agree to this deal? And could there be an end to the devastation across both Israel and Gaza in terms of the current fighting?
Thank you for having me. I think what the Palestinians wanted, a permanent ceasefire and end of the hostilities by the Israelis and the genocide that is imposed on them. So therefore, such kind of a temporarily ballistic or cosmetic ceasefire does not serve the Palestinian cause. You must know that these are the people who are suffering currently in Gaza because of the continuous bombardment, even at the humanitarian aids, which is even Israel themselves have admitted that they have been bombarding the aid people running for aid. So therefore, I think a ceasefire of a 60 days does not solve the main cause of ending this war. What you need is a permanent ceasefire, and that's a temporarily what will give you the guarantee for not Netanyahu not to come back to attack again on Gaza or on the West Bank. This is the situation developing in that region because of so much of regional changes and upcoming events. We need to see it not in isolation of Israel war on Gaza or on the Palestinians. We must remember that the war on Iran, the Syrian approach, the Abraham Accord, the visit of Netanyahu to the White House, all these issues have to be taken in consideration when we look at the wider pictures of the West Asian effort.
Yes, absolutely. And Dr. Awad, if you stay with us, because we're going to move away from diplomacy into the Gaza enclave, and the Red Cross is sounding the alarm as Israel continues to intensify its military operations within Gaza. The humanitarian group expressed deep concern, warning that Gaza's few remaining hospitals are buckling under the pressure. In a statement, the International Committee of the Red Cross said it is deeply alarmed by the escalation of violence in Gaza City and Jabalia, violence that has reportedly killed or injured dozens of civilians in the past 36 hours. Well, once again joining us, Dr. Awad. The situation, of course, continuing in Gaza, a continued military action, Operations Gideon's Chariot, continuing as expected following the breakdown of that Gaza ceasefire deal. We've just spoken about the diplomacy. There has, of course, been international condemnation and work from charities and NGOs looking at the deaths and the situation that is ongoing. Do you think the two could work hand in hand? And do you think these groups, along with the nations that are trying to discuss diplomacy, can come together to try and end the death and the killing which is going on within Gaza?
Well, I think there has to be the humanity consciousness has to be awakened, because what we are noticing is not killing of militants at all. You're targeting civilians. First, you destroyed Gaza for any sort of livelihood, and it has been continuously from 2005. We've seen that they have been causing them, pushing them into hunger, pushing them into despair. They want them to leave the countries. But here you are, nobody wanted to take the Palestinian, and none of the Palestinians wanted to leave their home. But that's where you're keeping them in a hot pot and you keep staring in the same ground. So therefore, the Palestinians are getting killed every day. The figures you are getting, it is far much higher than that what we are getting. But because the American and the Western media only believe in the Israelis' figures, but we know that the Red Cross, the humanitarian UNRWA of UN agencies, and people on the ground are showing us, and even photos showing how many people have been killed. Not less than 100 every day has been killed, especially among the people running for food and hunger. You're playing the hunger games with the people of the world. How can you survive? And you keep on watching all this destruction. I mean, this is something that I really can't see it every day, and I just get disturbance of the watching people getting killed for no reason. First, you said the Palestinians are using the Hamas using the civilian as a human shield. Then you destroyed the hospital because you thought there was under it there was a, the narrative of Israelis, a story of telling the world that these are Hamas militants, and then you do a collective punishment of the Palestinians is nothing to do with the ceasefire or with Hamas. It's something to do with the project that Israel wanted to do, is to complete annihilation of the Palestinian land. If we talk only of Gaza, Street, Joshua, let's go to West Bank. There are more than 100,000 Palestinians internally displaced. There's no Hamas there. There are settlers who have been getting involved and encroachment into the Palestinian territories, confiscating the land, and they are building. Ben Gvir, Smotrich are the two right-wing ministers in the government of Netanyahu. They're just scrapping the land of the Palestinians, and the settlers are expanding with a gun pointed at the Palestinians if they show any resistance. So where are we heading in these issues? It doesn't make any sense that even the international community is unable to come with one voice to end this violence. So I think the American and Mr. Trump, he should also understand that he does not read history. He only reading from his own interest that he wanted to make Gaza into Riberia, and then he realized it doesn't go into that resort what he in his mindset. This is a tragedy of a people who have been suffering since the first Nakba. This is the second Nakba since 1948 that they have been facing. I think what we need in this part of the world is to make the people understand that if you wanted to survive, Israel's survival in the region is only depending on finishing the problem of the Palestinian and having a two-state solution to finalize and have a comprehensive, a durable peace in that part of the world. You can't survive at the cost of others and keep on encroaching, attacking Lebanon, attacking Syria, attacking Iran, attacking Libya, attacking Yemen. It doesn't give you a safety. Might is not right. It is vice versa.
Yes, and Dr. Awad, we're going to move away from Gaza but stay in the Middle East as Israel is threatening direct military retaliation against Yemen's Houthi rebels after intercepting a missile launched towards its territory today. Defence Minister Israel Katz warned the fate of Yemen is the same as that of Tehran, referring to the 12-day campaign against Iranian military and nuclear targets. He added, whoever raises a hand against Israel, that hand will be cut off. The Iran-aligned Houthis claimed responsibility for the attack, saying they launched 4 operations against Israeli targets, including an airport and other sensitive sites. Let's listen in to what Yahya Saree, Houthi military spokesman, had to say.
نفذت القوة الصاروخية في القوات المسلحة اليمنية عملية عسكرية نوعية استهدفت مطار اللد في منطقة يافا المحتلة، وذلك بصاروخ باليستي فرط صوتي نوع فلسطين 2، وقد حققت العملية هدفها بنجاح بفضل الله، وتسببت في هروب الملايين من الصهاينة الغاصبين إلى الملاجئ وتوقف حركة المطار. ونفذ سلاح الجو المسير في القوات المسلحة اليمنية 3 عمليات عسكرية استهدفت 3 أهداف حساسة تابعة للعدو الإسرائيلي في مناطق يافا وعسقلان وأم الرشراش في فلسطين المحتلة، وذلك ب3 طائرات مسيرة.
Well, Israel says it may impose a naval and air blockade on Yemen if Houthi attacks persist. Since the start of the Gaza war in October, the Houthis have fired dozens of missiles and drones towards Israel and Red Sea shipping routes, most intercepted or falling short. Israel has responded with limited airstrikes, but Katz's statement signals possible escalation. US Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee confirmed being in a shelter during the launch, posting on X, maybe those B-2 bombers need to visit Yemen. Those US bombers were used in last month's joint US-Israel strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. This latest flare-up highlights how the Gaza war is continuing to fuel wider regional conflict, drawing in Iran, its proxies and US military support. Well, once again with us, Dr. Wael Awad, thank you for staying around. This situation, of course, is a tense one in the Middle East. We know it is a boiling point for tensions, culminating in that 12-day war between Israel and Iran. This strike from the Houthis, how significant is that? And is this the start of more to come?
Well, I think the Houthis made it from day one very clear that if Israel ends its attack on the Palestinian and its killing of the Palestinian, they will not attack or target any Israeli ship in the sea, in the Red Sea, nor the American or the British. On the contrary, what the American and the Britishers have been doing is provocating act against the Yemenis, including the Israelis, and attacking Yemen. So instead of calling for a complete halt of the hostilities by Israel, it's just continuing one side of the war. This is not a war. There is no equivalent war between Israel and the Palestinians. So the Houthis just stepped in to give some sort of a moral support, as symbolic among most of the Arab nations who have been shying away even from supporting the Palestinian at this critical moment. You know, Joshua, the problem in this issue, I think the irony lies in the United States itself, that the president of the United States is able to talk to India and China, India and Pakistan, he's able to talk to Ukraine and Russia, he's able to speak to Iran and to Israel to halt all the activities and the war, but yet he's supporting Netanyahu to continue with the war on Palestine and also going and supporting him in attacking Yemen. That is the way how we see a president of the United States who is leading the supreme powers in the world that is doing only what the Israelis want. What exactly Netanyahu is doing is just wanted to survive his political career by continuing war on the region. We are not living happily. If tomorrow he have the ceasefire in Gaza, he will definitely change his guard toward Lebanon. He will also attack on Yemen, because the main objective for Israelis, the current government led by Netanyahu, is to ensure that more, grabbing of land of Syria. He has already occupied 65 kilometers deep inside Syria. He's already aiming at the Litani rivers in Lebanon. So he wanted to push the Lebanese out of those villages in the southern part of Lebanon, because this is the main objective. And I think that mass deceptions of the public should change, and we can see the changes in the world, that we should have a sort of, conscious awakening that this is not going to be just Israel being a victim in this part of the world. Is in fact Israel and the United States the main cause of instability in the whole of West Asia.
Yes, and we're going to stay in the region. In a major reveal by Reuters, US intelligence has confirmed that Iran's military loaded naval mines onto vessels in the Persian Gulf last month, a move that heightened concerns in Washington. Two US officials say Tehran took this step shortly after Israel launched missile strikes on Iranian targets on June the 13th, possibly signalling plans to block the Strait of Hormuz. Although Iran has not deployed the mines, intelligence reports suggest the regime was seriously considering closing the strait, a critical global trade route through which about 20% of the world's oil and gas supplies flow. Interestingly, global oil prices have dropped over 10% since the US bombed 3 Iranian nuclear sites on June the 22nd. US intelligence could not pinpoint when Iran loaded the mines or whether the weapons have since been removed. Officials declined to reveal how they gathered the information, though such intelligence typically comes from satellite imagery or human sources. When asked for comment, a White House official praised President Trump's Operation Midnight Hammer and his maximum pressure strategy, saying they kept the Strait of Hormuz open and dealt a major blow to Iran. The Pentagon and Iran's UN mission did not immediately issue a response. Dr. Awad, I'd like your opinions on this. Of course, the Strait of Hormuz, a vital shipping route, as we mentioned, but do you think that this is a signal that the US intervention in the Middle Eastern conflict and tensions between Iran and Israel has potentially stopped a situation that could have huge global economic ramifications?
On the contrary, I think it is the American who is fishing in the turbulent water in the Persian Gulf and in the Mediterranean Sea and even in the Red Sea. Let's put it very clearly on this, because this is very important questions you're asking, because now you are focusing more on the strategic objective of the United States and the West to conquer the whole region by removing Iran from the pictures, and there will be total control on all the supply routes and the global trade in case of Hormuz, Strait of Hormuz, or the Red Sea, or the Mediterranean through the Suez Canal. Look at the global instability would have been happening. Look at the peace and tranquility in this part of the world, or global peace and tranquility will be also at risk if the Americans take this. Look at the development in this region. I'm talking to you a chronology of the event taking place in the Strait of Hormuz. It has been always Iranian who have been safeguarding the Strait of Hormuz because A, of their first interest, B, because of the neighboring country, which Iran have shown a great respect. 1988, when the American shot down the civilian airlines of the Iranian over the Strait of Hormuz, Iran threatened. Again, they have sabotaged, and there was a warship from UK and the American also attacking and provoking the Iranian safeguard, the guards who was guarding the maritime guard, and then they refused to even to close it. Even the American, when they pulled out of the nuclear deal with the West, implemented pressure and sanctions on Iran, threatening to increase the taxations on the shipping lines, and they could compensate for the loss of their exporting of their oil. All these things give you a clear indication that the provocative method used by the United States and UK and Israel has nothing to do with actually the tranquilities and peace in this region, and Iran is the victim and Iran is the culprit. No. Iran is not the culprit. Iran understands the geopolitical importance of its presence, the good neighboring with the neighbors, which they have not even used it, but American having more than 80 military bases in the GCC and in Syria and in Iraq, and yet they are encroaching into Iran because they know one day they have to take on Iran, not because of the Iranian closing the Strait of Hormuz. They wanted the Iranian to close the Strait of Hormuz because they are aiming directly at China. China is and India, Korea, and Japan are the main countries using they're importing oil from this part of the world. You think the United States will lose if this Strait of Hormuz is closed? On the contrary, it is the American with the largest exporters of gas and oil in the world now will be the sole beneficiaries plus the plus the Russian. And who will suffer? The Asian and the European because of closing the Strait of Hormuz. So let us think on terms of what is the main objective of the United States is to create a kind of a chaotic situation and contain China in the next step of turning the guns in the Asia Pacific against China.
Yes, and Dr. Rawad, we will come back with you to continue discussing the situation in the Middle East, particularly with Iran. But we're first going to look at Russian President Vladimir Putin and French President Emmanuel Macron, who held a 2-hour phone call, their first since September 2022. This to discuss the conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. The Kremlin called the conversation substantial, with Putin accusing the West of triggering the war in Ukraine and stressing that any peace deal must recognise new territorial realities and address what he described as the root causes of the crisis. In Paris, the Élysée Palace said President Macron urged an immediate ceasefire and called for talks towards a lasting settlement. He reaffirmed France's unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. As permanent members of the UN Security Council, both leaders highlighted the need for diplomacy, but with sharply different versions of the path to peace. While staying with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the United States is halting certain weapons shipments to Ukraine. The White House has confirmed, citing concerns about America's military readiness. White House spokesperson Anna Kelly told that the decision follows a Pentagon review of US defense commitments around the world. She said the move puts America's interests first, adding that the strength of the United States Armed Forces remains unquestioned. A US official said the pause comes over concerns that American weapons stockpiles may be getting too low. The Trump administration has not yet disclosed which weapons are affected or how extensive the pullback will be. Defense Under Secretary Elbridge Colby stressed that the Pentagon continues to offer President Trump options to maintain support for Ukraine while also safeguarding US defense readiness. Since the Russia-Ukraine conflict began in 2022, the US has provided Ukraine with tens of billions of dollars in military aid. Earlier this year, following a tense Oval Office meeting between President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, the White House temporarily paused military and intelligence support, a move that was reversed days later amid ceasefire talks. In late April, the two countries signed a deal allowing US access to Ukraine's mineral reserves in exchange for military aid to a joint defence fund. Defence experts say the US supplies about 20% of Ukraine's military hardware, Europe provides 25%, and the remaining 55% is produced within Ukraine itself. Well, we'll come back to that conversation that was taking place between Putin and Macron, not just on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We'll now turn to their conversation regarding Middle Eastern tensions. The Kremlin says President Putin emphasised that Iran has the right to peacefully develop nuclear energy and must continue honouring its obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Meanwhile, the French President's office says President Macron raised concerns about Iran's nuclear activities, calling the threat serious enough to warrant the involvement of all 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. He urged Iran to fully cooperate with the International Atomic Energy Agency. This comes after Iran's parliament passed a bill last month to suspend cooperation with the IAEA. That move follows joint US and Israeli airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities strikes they claimed were meant to stop Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. Tehran, however, denies having such intentions. President Macron reaffirmed his commitment to a diplomatic solution, one that not only addresses the nuclear issue, but also Iran's missile program and its role in the region. Both leaders agreed to coordinate their efforts moving forward. Well, once again with us is Dr. Wael Awad. Let's look now at this conversation. We know that Russia is a key ally of Iran. We know that Europe, of course, have been backing Ukraine in their war with Russia. But given the conflict that has been at play here, do you think that relationship between Russia and Iran, given the conflict with Israel, could have ramifications on other Western nations? And do you think that there could be support from Western nations in condemning what Iran are doing in line as they have done with Russia?
Why they have to condemn Iran? I don't understand. If you are attacking a sovereign nation, you are attacking against the UN Charter, which is also prevent any country from attacking a sovereign nation. You are against the Geneva Convention, which is also prohibit any country of attacking a nuclear site. And instead of condemning the attack by the United States and Israel, you are collaborating and you are doing a covert operation to a regime change. The whole attack on Iran was not only orchestrated by the Israelis and the Americans, by the way. The West have their own hand also sucked in the blood of poor Iranian. They have already taken part in this attack and this covert operation. It is Germany, it is France, it is UK, and Israel, including the United States, who has been attacking Iran. So I think there are two issues here to look at it, Joshua. One is that Macron has been talking to Putin after 3 years. They have not spoken when the war broke in Ukraine. And that's show you a clear indication that it is not the Ukraine or the Russian war on Ukraine. They still wanted to show support, but because they are worried about the Iranian issue. And they know there was a nuclear deal between 2015 between P5 plus Russia was taking a keen interest, and that was part of the deal 2015 with Iran, that they will safeguard the enrichment uranium that Iran have made, and they will save it with them as a guarantee for the nuclear deal. But here you are, you wanted to destroy Iran is not because you wanted worried about the Iranian nuclear deal. By the way, Iranian had never had the bomb. Even the UN agency, atomic agencies have been, nuclear agencies have been saying Iran is far away from the bomb, and they are not even have any evidence to prove that. And yet you are having a nuclear state, a United States, an undeclared nuclear state called Israel, who are having 90 nuclear head plus, and they are attacking a sovereign nation, and you wanted Macron to step in, not to solve the problem of Ukraine, but because he is an ally and a supporter of Netanyahu, and they wanted to have a global support for Netanyahu, especially against Iran, because Iran refused to speak even to the director of the atomic energy, because they know that he is nothing but a traitor who has been sending all the documents and data of the Iranian nuclear activities to Israel. And in fact, that is where the Iranians have captured so much of documents from the Israelis' intelligence, Mossad, and they were spreading it and exposing the Israelis' intention and their plan, not only for the nuclear Iran program, but also for neighboring countries like Egypt, like Saudi Arabia, like Iran, the future, even European, even India have something to do with those documents. It is possessed now with the Iranian. So I think the French president is trying to show his strength when it comes only in support of Israel. France is losing its also credentials and accountability as a peace broker in the region. You know,
yes.
Whether it is remain in Palestine.
Dr. Awad, I want to take our focus and look at that diplomacy now, because the European Union says that it is ready to facilitate a return to nuclear talks with Iran as diplomatic efforts intensify following a series of strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Vice President of the European Commission, Kaja Kallas, held talks with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, stressing that a return to the negotiating table is essential to avoid further escalation. She urged Tehran to re-engage with the International Atomic Energy Agency and to remain committed to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In response, Iran said it was open to dialogue, but insisted on security guarantees before any talks could resume. Foreign Minister Araghchi accused Europe of siding with the US and Israel and warned that any future diplomatic process must be balanced and free from pressure. The EU initiative follows the G7's call for a resumption of talks. It comes amid warnings from the UN's nuclear watchdog that Iran retains the know-how to rebuild its nuclear infrastructure quickly. With regional tensions still high, Brussels is positioning itself as a key mediator to restart stalled diplomacy. Dr. Awad, I apologise for interrupting there. I want to look at the potential role that the EU can play in this situation diplomatically. The US, of course, militarily have played their hand, targeting Fordo and other nuclear sites as well. Is there an opportunity here for real diplomacy and a lasting nuclear deal with Iran after widespread condemnation about the level of uranium enrichment and the purposes that Iran said that their nuclear facilities were acting for? Generally, that's seen as not the case. So how can Europe be the middleman in this situation?
Well, I'll play the devil advocate here. Iran has already made it very clear that they have been under the attack, and they have not moved out of the negotiating tables. In fact, they were always, even the last minute, they were discussing with the European, and there was a meeting, and they said that we wanted for a peaceful solution. They all agreed and endorsed that things before the preemptive attack of Israel on Iran, and followed by the American action. But remember, it was President Trump who pulled out of the nuclear talk. In 2018, he withdrew from there. He thought that Biden did not have a good deal, and he criticized the predecessors, and he said, I will have a better deal, because he's a property dealer. He's not dealing with the human issues in this part of the world. He considered everything is like a corporate house. It doesn't work like this. So you're attacking a sovereign nation. Iran definitely wanted to go back to the negotiating table. Iran wanted guarantee that it is all nuclear program will retain as a sovereign nation, as like any other nation in the world, who have the right to enrichment of the uranium for their civilian purpose use. So if they can come back to the negotiating table, well, that sounds good. That means they are committing to the peaceful solution to the crisis. You don't have to give the upper hand to any unilateral or exceptional attack by any country against any nation, because you think that they may be having in their head thinking of ambitions to have a nuclear bomb, and you don't reach to that the critical mass or a critical juncture where you needed a 90% of enrichment of uranium to go nuclear. I'm not going to talk about Iran, whether they will go nuclear or no, but I'm saying here, after this attack, trust me, the Iranians are more determined to ensure that there is no more attack from the United States or Israel. They wanted a permanent deterrence from any attack in future in Iran.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Wael Awad, thank you ever so much for staying with us and discussing multiple topics there from within the Middle East. We're going to move back to North America, though. And President Donald Trump has confirmed he's eyeing 2 or 3 top contenders to replace Jerome Powell as the chair of the US Federal Reserve, even though Powell's term runs until May 2026. Speaking on board of Air Force One, Trump didn't name names, but reports suggest he's considering former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh, Economic Advisor Kevin Hassett, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Former World Bank President David Malpass and current Fed Governor Christopher Waller have also been floated. Trump, who originally appointed Powell during his first term, has sharply criticised him since returning to office, accusing the Fed of failing to cut interest rates quickly enough. Rates currently stand between 4.25 and 4.5%. Let's listen in to what the US president has said.
We have a moron at the head of the Fed. He's a moron.
Speaking of SPAC MJ Powell, do you have a top advice for somebody?
I do. I have 2 or 3 top choices.
Could wait until a Fed board seat opens in 2026. Legally, Powell cannot be dismissed without cause, but Trump has threatened to challenge that precedent. A recent Supreme Court ruling called the Fed a quasi-private institution, potentially complicating any removal. Powell, speaking on Tuesday at a global banking forum in Portugal, defended the Fed's independence and stressed the need for non-political decision-making. We're here to ensure macroeconomic stability that requires staying above politics, Powell said, as he warned of possible inflation bumps over the summer. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank have both signalled they will decide on interest rate changes meeting by meeting, watching inflation and global trade uncertainty closely. Well, staying in North America and in a political upset shaking up New York's establishment, the city's Board of Elections on Tuesday confirmed the Democrat primary win of Zohran Mamdani, a 33-year-old state assemblyman and self-described Democrat socialist. Mamdani secured 56% of the vote in the third round of ranked choice voting, surpassing the 50% threshold and defeating former Governor Andrew Cuomo, a moderate, in a race that stunned the party. Mamdani will now face incumbent Mayor Eric Adams in November's general election. Adams, elected as a Democrat in 2021, is running as an independent after a corruption indictment later dropped, fractured his relationship with the party. Celebrating his win, Mamdani released a video on social media comparing his path to victory with Adams' own 2021 campaign. He won more first-round votes than Adams won across 7 rounds back then, he said. Born in Uganda, Mamdani is a Muslim immigrant and political progressive who has vowed to reshape city governance around housing justice, immigrant rights and public transit. His victory has triggered concerns among moderate Democrats fearing GOP attacks that paint him as too far left. Their fears were quickly confirmed. President Donald Trump called Mamdani a 100% communist lunatic, while Republicans promised to link his views to Democrats in next year's midterms. Still, Mamdani said his campaign is about reviving belief in the Democratic Party, noting he won support even in areas that backed Trump last year. When asked how he would respond if Mamdani, as mayor, attempted to block arrests of undocumented immigrants, Trump only said, "We'll deal with him." Well, moving on now, and the foreign ministers of the Quad nations have strongly condemned the April 2022 terror attack in Pahalgam, Jammu and Kashmir, India, which claimed 26 lives, including 25 Indian nationals and 1 citizen from Nepal. In a joint statement released, they extended their deepest condolences to the families of the victims and wished a speedy recovery to those injured. The Quad leaders vowed to bring the perpetrators, organisers and financiers of this barbaric attack to justice without delay. They urged all UN member states to cooperate actively in line with the international law and relevant Security Council resolutions to support this effort. The Quad also reaffirmed its focus on 4 key areas: maritime and transitional security, economic prosperity, critical and emerging technologies, and humanitarian and emergency response. In addition, the bloc launched the Quad Critical Minerals Initiative to strengthen supply chains and boost regional resilience. By working together and diversifying sources, the Quad aims to ensure stable access to essential minerals and promote a safer, more prosperous Indo-Pacific. Let's hear from the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, India's S. Jaishankar, Australia's Penny Wong, and Japan's Takeshi Iwaya.
And together we have a lot of shared priorities, a lot of things we care about in the world. I think there are many global problems, but also problems that we face in our respective countries that can be solved by us cooperating together.
A word about terrorism in the light of our recent experience. The world must display zero tolerance. Victims and perpetrators must never be equated. And India has every right to defend its people against terrorism, and we will exercise that right. We expect our Quad partners to understand and appreciate that.
Unfortunately, we meet against the backdrop of conflict and of escalating competition. So it has never been more important for us to harness our collective strength for peace, for stability, for prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and for all our peoples.
現在、中東や欧州では様々な混乱が起きております。我々4カ国が位置するインド太平洋は世界人口の半数以上を要する世界経済の成長エンジンであり、インド太平洋地域の平和と安定は国際社会の繁栄にとって不可欠であります。 インド太平洋地域の平和と安定のために
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has successfully passed his welfare plans after facing a rebellion from members of his own Labour Party. Major reforms have been issued in the original bill to secure enough support in Parliament. More than 35 Labour MPs have voted against the bill, and many others have been speaking out or staying away from the vote. The most criticised parts of the bill, including harsher rules for benefit claimants and cuts to housing support, have been dropped. Starmer's team has been talking to Labour moderates and union leaders to calm tensions. They have made changes to the bill and promised to keep working with welfare groups. Despite the climb down, Starmer has defended the bill, saying it reflects a commitment to reforming the welfare system while respecting public concerns. The revolt has marked Starmer's most serious party challenge since entering office. Activists and unions have been accusing him of straying from Labour's founding principles. The revised bill has now moved to the House of Lords, where debates are continuing. Well, we have a significant update in the ongoing trial of Sean Diddy Combs. The jurors have reached a decision on 4 charges, but remain deadlocked on the most serious one. The jury in Sean Combs' high-profile criminal trial will return to deliberation today after reaching a deadlock on the most serious charge of racketeering conspiracy, while arriving at a decision on the 4 lesser counts. These include 2 counts each of sex trafficking and transportation with intent to engage in prostitution. However, none of the verdicts are final, and jurors may change their decisions until the official announcement is made in court. However, in a note to the judge, the panel of 12 jurors, comprising 8 men and 4 women, stated that they were deeply divided on the racketeering charge, saying, "We have jurors with unpersuadable opinions on both sides." Judge Subramanian, addressing the jury earlier, reminded them that they are the sole and exclusive judges of the facts and must base their decision only on the evidence presented during this trial. This includes testimony from over 30 witnesses and numerous court exhibits. Not only that, but he also stressed that his rulings throughout the trial should not be interpreted as influencing their verdict and urged them to remain impartial and free from bias. Sean Combs was arrested last September after a sweeping federal sex trafficking investigation, which included raids on his properties. He has since pleaded not guilty to all charges, but for now, the ongoing deliberations will continue to determine whether the jury can reach a unanimous verdict or if a mistrial on the racketeering charge is imminent. Well, we head back to Europe, which is continuing to swelter as an exceptionally early summer heatwave grips the continent, forcing countries to shut schools, issue red alerts and brace for record temperatures. Millions across France, Spain, Italy and Germany are feeling the strain, with heat-exposed workers especially vulnerable as conditions worsen. Health authorities and employers in Germany are warning that outdoor workers and vulnerable communities could suffer heat exhaustion or worse as temperatures push towards new highs. One major factor behind this punishing heat is a record sea surface temperatures in the Mediterranean. Claire Nellis, spokesperson for the World Meteorological Organization, says the situation is like a land heat wave playing out at sea. It's the equivalent of a land heat wave. The Mediterranean Sea is suffering a pretty extreme marine heat wave right now, and that tends to reinforce the extreme temperatures over land areas. That's from Nellis in a briefing. Meanwhile, the United Nations Weather Agency has called the European heatwave exceptionally early and warned that such extreme events will only become more common as climate change accelerates. Scientists say the unusual timing and intensity of this heat spell underscored the urgent need for cities and governments to adapt. Urban infrastructure, emergency services and public health measures will have to keep pace as Europe braces for a hotter, more unpredictable future. Let's listen in to what Claire Nellis, the spokesperson for the World Meteorological Organization, has had to say.
What is exceptional, and I would stress exceptional but not unprecedented, is the time of year. You know, we are 1st of July and we are seeing episodes of extreme heat, which normally we would see later on. Why is it happening? Various reasons. One of them is that sea surface temperatures in the Mediterranean are
Well, that's all we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news from across the world.